Pull up a chair and buckle up. It's the Original Strength BodCast. Hey kids, we have a very special show for you this week. We have Annie O'Connor, the founder of the World of Hurt Corporation and the author of the book World of Hurt, A Guide to Classifying Pain. This is a fantastic interview with lots of information that you're going to want to write down.
What are you hoping to get out of this? I mean, as much as you're giving me the freedom to speak,
Usually I'd like to have selfish conversations where I just learn, and
okay.
if it's helpful for people that also get to benefit from it, it's great.
Yeah. So my topic choice always is persistent pain, right?
Okay.
And there's a lot or pain. I just kind of say sometimes persistent symptoms, Tim, because pain doesn't necessarily have to be pain, whether it's a symptom that prohibits you from living the best life you're supposed to live, right?
Right.
Or a movement problem. You're just not moving like you think you should move. I probably have some simple thought processes that could help redirect a path, so that, that's a good 36 years of practice, right? You kind of,
Right.
You start learning something, then you start serving, and those learning and serving are very different.
Yes, ma'am. To me, that sounds like that would be very helpful information for someone.
It would. And if, there's an analogy, when people are hurting, right? When they're hurting or they're suffering or their life is not what they think it should be or what they expected it to be, right? However we want to frame set that situation. We've come to, in our practice in physical therapy or the, because that's what I am, is, so I always like to use metaphors and analogies, because if you can kind of take them out of that world and conceptualize something in a different world, you may be able to accept something different in your world, right?
Right.
And so analogies and metaphors are very useful in persistent symptoms and disabilities. So one of the metaphors we like to use just to help people how the system works. I think it's fascinating, and I know that because Original Strength is really written off of how the system works. I mean, we're coded to have certain movement behaviors, and we're coded to breathe a certain way, and all of those things are inherently, within our brains created. And sometimes we just forget how to use those. They're programs that have gotten rusty. Well, why and how our system hurts is a very important system that people don't normally understand. They don't understand why they hurt, and that there actually is 5 steps to a pain-free life. And a metaphor like how your lamp works, because your pain alarm system and your electrical system are very similar. So when we try to help them appreciate, how do we get to a pain-free life, there's a series of steps we take, just like we do when our lamp doesn't work. So we give this little picture of just an idea of like, hey, when your lamp doesn't work, look, go check the bulb, right? That would be the first step, and everyone gets that, no problem. Or check that little switch. Maybe you forgot, to let the electricity actually flow. Well, in your body, when your body hurts, it's really important to go check the body part and establish whether some type of injury has occurred. If there's some type of chemical injury that occurred, well, we need to manage that, until it's in a phase ready to move. And then if it's not a chemical problem, we need to look for, does it need to move in a certain direction? We need to look for, do we just need to get blood and oxygen back to those tissues and start moving and get them stronger and get them more flexible? And so getting people to comprehend, like, step one is always looking at the body part, and then if you're doing things, if you're intervening, you're taking steroids and you're doing all these different exercises and you're not really getting better, if you've taken and you're like, Annie, I've tried 6 different light bulbs and my lamp still doesn't work. I'm flicking that switch. At some point you got to go, well, what's step number 2? Maybe it isn't that. And step 2 in your lamp would be, well, go check the cord. Maybe the cord's not plugged in. Maybe there's a kink in the cord. Maybe the cord's frayed and old and needs to be replaced. Well, what's that in the body? Well, maybe you should check the nerve that actually goes to the body part. Maybe that nerve has gotten, snagged, or it's caught up in its path and there's not enough blood flow getting through that nerve. Or maybe that nerve in itself has gotten tight and it needs to be. And so things are more referred as opposed to something local. So you have certain exercises that are very neurodynamic or focused on the nerve, and right? And you repair the cord and you stretch it out and it looks fine, and you've checked the plug and you're still hurting, or your lamp still doesn't work. Well, what would be that third place to go check? Well, that third place to go check would be, wow, maybe the circuit breaker, maybe there's a faulty circuit, and maybe something is in an area where I can't see. I can always see the lamp and see the bulb and see the switch and see the cord. I can always see the nerves and I can always see the body parts, but maybe I need to start thinking about going to the places that are unseen, and what that is in the lamp, it's the circuit breaker, but what is that in the body? It's starting to look at more of how our brain is influencing our symptoms. The brain is a very protective organ. It was designed to protect us, and certain centers of the brain can use pain as a way of indicating that we need to make some changes. And one of the changes is how we think about the problem. A lot of times people are very fearful of moving, or they don't know if it's safe to move. And they're thinking and believing about what's occurring in their life is dangerous, and that these signals from their body are indicating harm. And maybe their thinking and believing is more in a state of dysfunction than the actual tissue. And how protective the brain can be when the thinking and believing is not aligned with what the body's capable of doing. And so sometimes it's not about what we do in the body, it's how we provide them a different way of analyzing the safety of what they're doing and returning control to people in the respects of, how do you know when I should stop versus pace versus push? And that good old fashioned no pain, no gain, and that this is good pain, or what we call safe pain. And so dealing with that step, step number 3, where we sometimes got to flick the switch, because they're thinking one way with it, and that stinking thinking's getting into a bit of protecting, and it's keeping them from the life they want to lead. And so there are direct interventions that are very effective for when that mechanism is dominating someone's suffering, just as effective it is when your lamp doesn't work and you need to go down there and flick that switch, right? Now, the reality is, if I'm doing good things for my nerves, I'm doing good things for my thinking and believing, and my body, is still hurting, there are 2 other possibilities to why that could be. And again, those 2 other possibilities are uniquely involving, the brain itself. The brain has 3 distinct ways it can protect you. It can overprotect you, love you too much, okay? Or it can do what we see, in the sense of coping. Like when people are going through some serious times, right? Life's had some serious things, whether it's depression, anxiety, whether things of their past are kind of bubbling up, and or they've gone through some significant life trials, and even non-faith-based people probably face a lot of this more than faith-based, because we have we have the ability to really detour that and cast that to our great creator, who will actually do something for us about it. Well, people that don't have those kind of beliefs often suffer from the mechanism where our brain is so sophisticated, it can recognize that we're not coping very well. We're not managing the circumstance that's going on in our life currently, whether that be a divorce, whether that be financial ruin, whether that be social isolation, whether that be a loss of somebody who's very close to us. We're slipping into a negative type of life, where we're not living our best life. And so when our brain senses we're not coping, it often will manifest symptoms within our body, kind of as a diversion to get our attention to go seek help. And it's a very cool way that our brain does it. Our brain has the ability, I just find this stuff fascinating when you start really understanding it. Our brain has the ability to shut the blood supply off to any tissue in our body. Isn't that cool that God did that? He was like, you know what, I'm going to actually make the brain capable of shutting down blood supply. And when the brain actually does shut the blood supply off to maybe your Achilles tendon, or maybe your rotator cuff tendon, or maybe your shoulder joint, or maybe your quadricep muscle, whatever you hold valuable or you hold important in your body, your brain says, you know what, I'm going to shut the blood off to that quad. And now signals are going to start firing, because that tissue is going to be like, hey, what about some blood down here? I'm a live, thriving tissue. And so once those signals start firing, now the brain can sensitize those signals, and now they can become painful. And physiologically, that is a very simple explanation of what's sometimes called mind-body disorders or somatic symptoms. But the fact that our brain can recognize we're not coping, go, well, she needs to get a little help here. She's not managing this well. You know what? I'll shut the blood supply off to that shoulder, because she always worries about that shoulder. And then I'll sensitize those signals, and she'll go see that therapist again. That therapist always got her out of that last run amok she went into. And so now I've got symptoms, not so much because my body part's not working. I got symptoms because I'm not coping. And, as a provider like myself, when someone comes to see me and I can't make an argument relative to their movement, why they hurt, but they're under just enormous amounts of stress and they're not doing well, or they're not living the life they want, you have to start maybe thinking that, whoa, maybe the brain's causing a power outage in the body, and maybe that's why that body part hurts. And that is synonymous, just like we know in our lamp. Hey, if your lamp doesn't work because your electrical provider decided to have a power outage in your area, you can put 24 bulbs in that thing. That thing ain't going to work. You can plug, you can flick switches. You got to call the electrical provider and let them know you're a little upset with the fact that you have no electricity.
That's cool.
Yeah, that is cool, because it makes it normal, because this is also often misunderstood sometimes as a psychological problem, when we're just, we're not coping with the normal emotional, social things that happen to human beings, and how sometimes just by acknowledging that I'm not doing as best as I can with what circumstance I'm in can be enough to convince the brain that you're starting to take positive actions.
I was just about to ask you, what is the path for somebody that their brain decides they're not coping well?
And you already know this, especially after reading some of your book again, is you got to acknowledge that this is going on in your life. And you have to accept that how you're managing it right now is not fruitful. And you have to acknowledge and say, yeah, right now, man, I'm a bit angry and I'm not managing that anger well. And once you start connecting that, wow, my symptoms are not trending with my movements, they're trending with these social triggers, like where I'm at or who I'm with, or they're trending with these emotional feelings I'm having. You can start saying, okay, how do I start targeting my coping to those triggers? And as you become aware of them and you start flipping them from those negative situations into a more positive, or you kind of reconcile them a little bit more, and you start getting back to doing things that are rewarding to you, your brain sees, okay, cool. That person, she's coping again. She doesn't need these symptoms anymore.
That's awesome.
That is awesome. That's modern day thinking of this. It's not about, giving people antidepressants and mood stabilizers. It's not about laying them in a room to meditate. And even though meditation and breathing are very important, but if you're not recognizing and acknowledging what's happening to you and reconciling that into a better place, and you're not moving forward and living the life that's rewarding and pleasurable to you, your brain has still purpose to alert you that things aren't going well. It's alerting you that the war within you is the problem.
Mm.
Yeah, and it's a really cool thing. So modern day pain treatment, especially for persistent symptoms and especially for people that are dealing with those types of situations, is to say, let's start looking at your life. Let's not look at your body parts. And if you have a provider that's still telling somebody, you got a bad rotator cuff, you got a bad disc, you got a bad, everything's bad, right? They may be missing the mark in helping that person really get to the place where they can be, pain-free. Yeah. And this is a big part of pain. You got to be careful you're not selling it as a psychological problem, because it's normal. I mean, it's working in all of us every day. That's why I think when we start explaining to people how the system works and they realize how normal this is, they start going, this is a problem. I'm saying, I know it's a problem. So what are we going to do about it? Right. And we don't have to make it such a stigma, like they need a psychologist or things like that. Not to say psychology is unnecessary. It's necessary when it needs to be necessary, but it's not always necessary.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And a lot of times we make psychology an abnormal situation. I mean, which it's not. It's a very normal situation. It's just gotten to a point where we're not coping. And so talking out loud with someone or stabilizing the mood a little bit with some pharmacy may be a good place to start. But if you don't return control to that person and connect the dots on what's happening, they'll feel like they got to see you forever, and that's not what life is about, right?
Right.
It's about connecting them with them. It's not about connecting them with somebody, Nobody can solve anyone's problems but themselves. And you and I know the great Lord solves those problems. But, when you're not somebody who's deeply entrenched within that faith,
It's a challenge.
it's a challenge, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, if I finish a story and then you can ask me some questions or have some comments, but, it's so fascinating. Sometimes the brain can overthink the signal and overprotect it. Sometimes the brain can recognize we're not coping and just cause signals within the body by decreasing blood flow to get our attention. use diversion. And then another really cool element to the brain is that if we've gone through some serious trauma, like think about an amputee, like who's got a traumatic loss of a limb, or or even somebody who's gotten a spinal cord injury, or you don't even have to have an injury. You can just think that this is very badly injured. Our brain has the potential to reorganize the representation of that body part. You can almost re-image it. And when the brain reorganizes the representation of that body part to the point where it forgets it, it can cause different array of symptoms within the body, and it can actually shut down the functionality of that body part. So it's a little different than causing no blood flow. It's just basically forgetting it and neglecting it. And by doing that, it's a form of protection, but it also causes an array of symptoms. And one way to think about it is the concept behind phantom pain, right? If you've heard of phantom pain, where you can hurt in a body part that's not even there, and people go, how could that be? And I go, well, it's easy, because your brain has a representation of every body part. That's just how somebody who's had a severed spinal cord, they always come to me, they're like, how the heck can I be hurting in my body? I cannot move my body. How could I be hurting in my body? And I'm like, well, it's a great question. I go, you have a brain, your brain wasn't traumatized. So your brain has the ability, it carries representation of every body part you have. And so if the brain in some respects is re-imaging that body part as broken, or to some degree is forgetting it because of the massive trauma that it underwent, it can now produce symptoms in the body. And now again, the treatment's not to the body, the treatment is to the brain. It's doing a series of special exercises that kind of re-image the brain to the body again, almost like a computer. And some of that, which is really cool, why I love your book, is recoding the development that we went through as children, because this part of the brain is where we house those motor programs.
That's cool.
Yeah, so when we're dealing with this mechanism, your approach is really a great approach for someone dominated by that mechanism, because it's very much driven off of that normal coding of our normal developmental movement patterns. And so if we can get people to kind of go back to rolling and crawling and doing things, their brain gets reminded of how those body parts work together, and it starts running those programs and relearning those programs just like a computer.
So it really is like a reset then.
It's a reset.
How about that?
Yeah. So when you talk about that, like you do, that's the mechanism you're working on within the brain.
Wow.
To affect the performance in the body. And then what does that mean? What's that in the lamp? And I said, well, in the lamp, isn't it cool that on every pole outside of every home, there's a little box. And on that box, that's where, as the great provider sends electricity all over the area, those boxes know which home the electricity needs to go to. So when my lamp doesn't work, and I call the provider and I'm like, hey man, I got a power outage in my area. And the provider goes, you don't have a power outage in your area. And you're like, well, I changed my light bulbs. I flicked switches. I looked at the outlet. I went down and checked the circuit breakers. What else could it be? That provider will more than likely say, you know what? I'll send a dude out there. He'll climb up the pole. He'll re-image your home to the box again, and it'll restart the flow of electricity. Somehow there was a breakdown between that box. They lost the image of your home. And so it's really cool when we think about the electrical system's connection to how our body works, because when we search for people's ability to get better, actually treat the problem, not manage the problem. We look what mechanism is dominating and where is the breakdown. Because if we focus our care on that mechanism with the education and the specificity of movement, you can have a full abolishment of symptoms. Now, you can only have that if that person is willing to learn and understand and embrace the approach. And unfortunately, at this day and age, there's so many people that have been told so many different things, and then they start Dr. Googling everything, and everything's made about some type of ailment in the body, as opposed to really just explaining how cool it is in how our system works, right? And that if we figure out where that breakdown is, just like the lamp, you can have a very profound effect. You don't have to always get a new lamp, So I hope that was a fun little journey through the pain alarm system.
That was really fun.
That's the premise of the book. The World of Hurt, A Guide to Classifying Pain, was in hopes at getting providers like me and you to look differently at the problem of pain and to look for those mechanisms as a way of re-guiding, resetting someone's course in their recovery, and that's when, Sarah brought your name up and I was like, I've read this guy's book. I don't know when I did or what I did, or somebody threw it at me, because I love using developmental sequencing as a part of movement retraining, especially when I'm dealing with that mechanism.
Right.
I was like, wow, I'm just fascinated with your work and your thought process. And I don't know how you got there, but boy, you got there,
That was a miracle. That was miraculous.
Right. Well, I have the same miracle, but he does that to a lot of us, crusaders for people, right? I mean, but it was cool. It's cool.
Nice. So out of the 5 steps, is it person dependent that, like, have you found that one step is the biggest hurdle, or you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I love that question, because people often ask me like, hey, is it, can you have more than one mechanism going on at a time? And then I go back to them, well, could your lamp not work for a couple reasons? And they say, yeah. And I said, yeah. I mean, the idea though would be to identify the dominating reason, because, if you've ever fooled around with dominoes, you line up the dominoes and you get them all set up, and then you push one over and they all go down. How rewarding that is, right? And that's, if you can focus on the dominating situation, the one that's really overarching the whole story or sorrow, you could have a domino effect. Now, in all good dominoes too, you could push them over and a bunch of them changed, and then boop, one popped up.
Right.
And if you're not a provider who recognized all the things that did change with what you did, and then recognized how things stopped and they kind of plateaued, and you don't reassess and accept there could be a different reason and adjust that program to meet that reason with the education and the care, you might not be able to push the next group over. So, reassessment is a service. That's why I tell people, look, I don't diagnose. I definitely don't diagnose. I don't treat. I assess until there's nothing left to assess.
That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's my commitment, as the co-pilot. They're the pilot. I'm gonna lay out the flight plans, and they're gonna choose which one. They own the outcome because it's their life, but I'll own the measurement of the outcome, because I want them to see that they are doing better, or by their choice, they're not changing, so that they can possibly accept a possible different reason. So co-pilot things are very important, but, I'm not going to decide for them or own their outcome or, that. I mean, that's a virtually impossible thing to do, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you can't sell healing. They're going to heal themselves. The good Lord's going to heal them, and that. So, but you can nurture some of those behaviors and those thought processes by thinking differently.
Yeah, that's why I was asking that question, because I was thinking if there were one of the 5 steps that could be the hardest, would it be belief? Like what they're, where they're at in their mind or what their beliefs are.
It is, and we call it central sensitivity, or the circuit breaker is kind of a fun way. They've got a faulty circuit up there, and it's wrapped around what they're thinking and believing. And that's now, how do you, and people that are very good at thinking and believing, let's agree, they're very intelligent people, and they're very analytical people. And they have incredible willpower. I mean, they're just people that were known to do and did. Okay, so the way to help them along, or consider changing their thinking and believing, because you can't change someone. You can only make a credible argument that they should probably think about it, right? You need to meet intelligence with intelligence, for one thing. You need to present yourself in an area and help them understand, let them read and absorb and learn. And then you have to give them a new way of analyzing, because the way they're analyzing is ending up in a protective response. Okay, so if you can give them a different way of looking at the problem or analyzing the problem, you can generate a possibility that they consider changing their thinking and believing. So yeah, nice job. That is one of the toughest mechanisms to work with, because they're usually very intelligent, analytical people. They have sought out several opinions. They've been told things by intelligent, analytical people, and they more than likely have sought knowledge on it. And those can become deeply rooted thinking and believing processes. So if you can have a good alliance that's built on personal, not clinical, and you can present information about how the body works, and you can develop a new way of looking at it. So you've been looking at it this way. Let's take a look at it this way. I analyze my investments this way. Well, what happens if I analyze them this way? I might make $1 million over here, like giving them that concept. So why don't you analyze both ways and see if they both come out with the same answer? Because if they do, well, then that's a no-brainer. If they don't, if you've been barking up this tree for that long, maybe you should consider this tree. And you'll sway them a little bit without conflicting.
So just try to create an opportunity for a shift.
A shift.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll simplify it for me. Thank you. But no, it's cool stuff. I mean, the research that's been done in this area over the last 3 decades has been just outstanding. It's just, unfortunately, that research doesn't get to clinical practice, and that's why we decided to write the book. We've been doing it for so long in the hospital that we work. I was like, why isn't this getting shared with the rest of the world? And that's when it came out in publication, 2015. And
is that how you started the World of Hurt Corporation also?
Yeah, because it's an interesting story. Because the approach was one that I was training our people in our hospital that I still work for. We didn't even comprehend bringing it outside of it at the time, right? And then when we were writing the World of Hurt book, which was going to be the third training manual, someone said, hey, why don't we go to publication with it? So then it got a publisher and whatever. Well, then at that time, the hospital gave the rights to the material to the publisher. Exactly. So then at that point, now the publisher is going worldwide with this. And I'm like going, hey, a book is one thing, but you got to train it, And so then I went to the hospital and they're like, we have no desire to do that. And so then I went to the publisher in the hospital and they gave my the rights to the co-author and myself to train the material. So then it was crazy because the demand for training became flat, and so the World of Hurt Corporation, which was my private practice all along, just became a larger entity than it was, but it was cool. It's opened up incredible, there's 8 different healthcare systems right now, Tim, that are putting this approach within their practice, and they're having such grand results, and to consult with them on what they're doing and how they're making it better and all this sharing that's going on. All glory to the Lord. When he, I will, 2 things that I think we did really well with this book. We really brought forth what was already established. Like, instead of creating something new, we said, why aren't we, bringing forth good work, right? And, and the pain mechanism classification system that David Butler and Louis Gifford, these 2 incredible pain clinicians, brought out into the public in the 90s. We just kind of nurtured and studied and trained and packaged what they started, right? And then, to have research come off of that. And so then the 3 training manuals and a book to be formed on that, 185 clinicians wrote that book. I'm just the mouthpiece, and then the book itself, all the proceeds go to feed a memorial fund that exists within the hospital of a clinician that used to practice this and nurtured it. And, and so the Mike H Fund, all the proceeds go to feed that fund, which continue the teaching and research on the methodology. And so I say it, when you can step back and see God's work in hand, it's just like, wow. I mean, that is just amazing what he is doing in collaboration around this material right now.
That is amazing.
And how he's affecting all of these healthcare systems, all these private practice universities. I mean, I just sit back and go, wow, did he give you, he let you sit over in that seat, he's the driver and you just got to sit in the front seat,
It's a fun ride though.
Oh, it's been an incredible ride. I just give glory to him, That's awesome. My job, give glory to him and talk about it,
Well, you're doing a good job at it.
Yeah,
awesome.
I know you know that too, because you give a lot of glory to him as well in your work.
So you mentioned connecting the dots a little bit while ago, but yeah, it's like he's the great dot connector.
He is, isn't he?
It's just very cool.
It is really cool. And when you can just kind of be at a time in your life or, in a time in your service where you can really just, hey, wow, check that out. Like just take a breath or a step and see what he's just done. That it's a gift. You can be incredibly content, with what's happening, regardless of all the stuff that's happening,
with all the stuff.
Yeah, I just go, it's all stuff. There's been blessings from those stuffs, but it depends on who you're talking to, who's open to hearing about it.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to know more about the World of Hurt, where can they go? Where should they go?
Well, the website right now is really where we're working very hard to house the material. So any courses that are, and the courses are open to everyone. People think it's a healthcare thing. I say, no, it really, I've had people show up in a course that they are suffering pain. That's why they're there. And I think to myself, wow, nice job. Like, it's just amazing to me. And I love when it's a physician or a nurse or a trainer or a bodywork specialist, or because we need to have a common language
Hmm.
by which we do and how we fit into the service of the people we serve. So the World of Hurt, it's www.worldofhurt2,
Number two.
yeah, .com is the website that houses all the information about the courses or mentoring opportunities, or another great place. We've posted over 500 some videos of different educational material for whether yourself or people that you're working with and you want to have them hear it, from somebody. Um, Twitter houses a lot of our videos. So at World of Hurt 2 is our Twitter handle. And so I tell people those are usually, where you can see a lot of what's going on relative to this material, where we're at, how we're applying it, and things like that. And then I'm always open to a conversation or an email, or I have been amazed at how the word gets out, right? And I'll get an email from someone helping someone or someone hurting, and and that's simply too. It's just worldofhurt2@gmail.com. So those are our three ways. And whether it's myself, Annie O'Connor, or Melissa Watson, who kind of is the vice president of the company and helps me very much get the word out, you'll definitely get a response.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I will put those in the notes of the show. So if you're listening, they'll be right in the comment section or the note section.
Can I send you that little lamp document
Absolutely.
and a
Yeah.
PDF, and you can kind of send it out to your peeps?
Yes, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'd be my pleasure.
Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Annie O'Connor.
Tim, thank you very much. I hope this is the first of many.